just so you know. If you have a question, please either raise your blue hand in the participant window or your actual hand, and I'll call on you to ask your question, and the order is raised as best as possible. And just before you ask your questions, if you could please identify your news outlet, that'd be great. So we'll get started now. And if anyone has any questions, please, like I said, either raise your blue hand in the chat or in the participant window, or your physical hand if I can see you, and I'll unmute you. Mike, is that you raising your hand? Oh, okay. Okay, Lola. I see Lola first, then Ross. All right. Okay, hi. Lola.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Great. Just really quickly, I know there's 16 school districts. Roughly how many kids are we talking in total?
I don't know if I know that off the top of my head, but I could find that out for you, Lola. I know that it's, I believe we represent a little more than half of the students in the state.
Okay.
I believe.
That's kind of what I'm wondering.
I'll find that out and get that back to you.
Perfect, thank you. But does it include Burlington? Do you guys technically include?
Yes.
You do include Burlington, okay. So everyone is doing, within these school districts, is following the hybrid model where you have 2 days in person for students, which means, if I understand correctly, that teachers will be teaching for 4 days a week in person. Right.
Yes.
And the students will be receiving 2 days of in-person instruction.
So for the majority of students, yes, we are intent for Wednesdays. A lot of the districts will be doing some intervention then and callback. So teachers may be expected to do some instruction, smaller group during those days. And it would be, yes, in-person class would be 4 days for a teacher. No.
Right.
I think that it's important to note, Lola, that there are some parts of the plan that might be applied differently in each of the districts or supervisory unions. So I think use of Wednesday in what the teachers are assigned to do on Wednesday might vary.
Right.
So I would want to be careful that we don't say something that makes people think that we're applying this broadly to all schools, because those plans are still being worked out.
Right. I just wanted to make sure in terms of the commonalities, it's hybrid, it's teachers teaching 4 days in person. I know they're teaching every day, but teaching in person 4 days, kids get 2 days instruction. My kind of main question really is, with teachers teaching 4 days a week in person, and it seems like all families getting the option of going fully remote if they choose, are you concerned about being able to staff this?
I think where we're at right now is, we know we have some work to do to figure out whether or not there are some HR issues that we have to attend to with our staffing structures. We also know that we have some partner organizations that we can work with, especially with our older kids. I know some people are exploring the partnerships with Vermont Virtual Learning as an option for some of our students. So I think where we all are, Lola, is we're trying to determine what number of students are going to fall into that category of not returning for in-person. We're going to stay in that fully remote, and until we get that information from families, it's very complicated to determine exactly how that's going to look. So we're trying to get that information really quickly so that we then can be able to determine exactly what we can offer for students in that fully remote option.
I'm gonna hand the mic over for a little while.
Okay, I think Ross is next here. Hold on 1 second. All right, Ross, you're up.
Hi there, Ross Ketchke from NBC5. Hope everybody's doing well. So my question is, what kind of structures and safety mechanisms might be in place with the teachers interacting with both different groups of kids who are coming in on the alternating days or on the opposite days of each other? make sure that they maybe don't act as a bridge between one sick but asymptomatic person in, we'll just call it group A, and then becoming a bridge to spreading possible infection to group B?
So part of those instructions will be, or the health guidance to follow will be the temperature checking of staff and students on a daily basis. It does help us with the hybrid model that we will have half that group in. On Wednesdays, the intent is that across our districts, everybody made the commitment that we would do the deeper cleaning before a new cohort comes in. But that is, we're hoping that our cohorts can stay that small and that teachers would be, that contact tracing is so important. And that's all part of why we went with the hybrid model and staying in smaller cohorts. I don't think there's a guarantee for anything, right? But we need our teachers to teach and we need to be in person.
I do think a big part of it, I'll just add to that, Beth, is the layers of safety measures that we all will have in place in terms of the facial coverings, the physical distancing when students are present, the increased hand hygiene throughout the day, making sure that everybody's getting the health screening before they come through the door, whether that's a staff member or a student, in just making sure that we're attending to enhanced cleaning and disinfecting throughout the building each day. So there are lots of safety measures that will be in place, but like Beth said, we're doing the very best we can to try to prevent that from occurring.
Certainly, and the only other question that I have at the moment would be, with different school districts in different parts of the state, especially the further you get out from the greater Burlington area, the makeup of the student body really changes, and the makeup of the environment they're going home to really changes. What are some of has that been a discussion, addressing some of the challenges that might, come about with that? What fits a model in Burlington might not fit a model, somewhere in Franklin County, let's say. What might be some examples of that, if that's been a discussion so far?
Can I just clarify your question? Do you mean in terms of the health and safety information, or communication with families, or are you talking instructional models?
Really, I mean, it's a broad-based question for sure. Certainly all of the above. I mean, I know that this is kind of having to rethink every aspect of, from getting kids to school to getting them home and having them in the classroom has all been a part of this. So I would say, even just, has that been a part of the conversation, is thinking about how these different areas should be approached differently?
You want me to start, Beth, or?
Sure.
So I think that, what I will say for the Champlain Valley superintendents is we have literally spent hundreds of hours together in the past few months. Probably that's a low estimation, Beth.
Yes, I think so.
But we have spent a lot of time talking about each of our individual regions, and the resources that we have available to us do differ, because we definitely have some differences, and we also have some things that are very similar. I think where we're the same is around the 6-foot physical distancing and the requirements within the guidelines to make sure that, we're posting occupancy limits in our rooms. And that's the place where we really were the most similar, that we all looked at it and said, we can't get there. That was a commonality where we really started out wanting to explore how could we get all of our kids back. And that was the place where we just said, there's no way we could, in good faith, say that, we've looked at this classroom space and we have an occupancy of 15, but we'll do the best we can, even though we know we have 20 kids in that room. So we also have fixed staffing members available to us. So the idea of spreading out and using different parts of your building, that's something we also all explored, but at the same time, we don't all have enough teachers to be able to do that. I think that, in terms of community resources, those are different. And I think in terms of communication planning, we all have some differences around that as well. Beth, do you want to add anything there?
Sure. I think around the instructional model, we set out saying we will be the same to support each other and to be able to share that. So first part of our thinking was, especially for our young children, let's get them in the building. And then we started to look at, is that possible and feasible, as we went through the guidelines. And really, we spent a day unpacking those guidelines, and realized that that's the hiccup in it was that 6 foot that we just knew. And some of the superintendents mapped out that to really what it looks like in a classroom. And as for our district, we're still looking at that, because it just, we would all love to see all students back in the district. Even as Champlain Valley, we even within our work have separated into larger high schools and smaller high schools and medium size. And we had those discussions on what it could look like and to be aligned with the same size school. And that's really when we ended up with our hybrid model, and supporting each other through that.
I'll pass off the mic to some other folks. I'm sure everybody's got questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. Next, let's see, here is Mike from the Essex Reporter.
Hey, Ben, and everyone else. So, yep, Essex Reporter, Colchester Sun, Milton Independent. I know my colleague Bridget is here as well, so we're kind of overlapping a bit. But I actually, I have a handful of questions, and I guess the underlying theme is, are they more relevant to asking specific questions to a principal? Is it going to vary by school? Is it going to vary by district? Or, we're trying to keep things the same across the whole CVSA here. And an example of one of the questions that I'm thinking of is, how quickly, I guess, could a family opt in or opt out of that option to just have their student or their child go to remote learning? If they start them in person for a couple weeks and they decide it's not for them or whatever else, can they take them out of the school and kind of just keep doing that on and off? And again, maybe that's specific to Essex High, can handle that more readily than Milton High. So I don't know if there's been any real thought given to those kind of decisions.
I think today we're speaking on behalf of the Champlain Valley Superintendent, so I don't think that we could answer that as a region. But I would say, Mike, that I think that most likely that will be determined at the organizational level within each of the supervisory districts or supervisory unions would be my guess.
Yes, correct. And I think we're all at different places within our districts too, and finding out right now who is choosing the remote and who is choosing the hybrid. So we're at different places with that. We came out with the same as we will do the hybrid. Once we found out that remote could be offered as well, that was like the first deciding moment. So then I think it's into the districts, into figuring out what does that look like within the district, and signing up or opting out. Or
Okay, great, thank you. So just real quick, do we think it might be more appropriate for, say, me specifically for the Essex Reporter to maybe set up something with you, Beth, at another time to talk about district-specific questions?
Absolutely, I'd be glad to do that.
Great, sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Oh, I see a hand here from Bridget. All right, Bridget, you should be good.
Hello, thank you for hosting this today. Yes, Bridget from Milton Independent, Colchester Sun. I'm wondering what kind of surveys you sent out to teachers, if any, what kind of feedback you've received at the teacher level on their comfort level with this sort of programming.
So I think we can't really answer that as a whole Champlain Valley superintendents. That would be individual districts in doing that work. As we've discussed that, we have found commonalities, but that is, that's been done individually.
Okay.
All right. Any questions? Oh, hold on. Let's see. Mike. Oh. There you go, Mike. You're on.
Thank you very much. First of all, how many districts do you guys cover? Your association?
I believe it's 16 or 17. It's most of Addison County, all of Chittenden, all of Franklin, and Grand Isle.
The most of Addison, okay. My understanding is that not all of the school districts are using the same sequence, that some students will go 2 days in a row. Others will go like a Monday, Thursday, and the others will go Tuesday, Friday with a Wednesday off period. I'm just wondering who's doing what, or if you know which model each school district is using.
I think we chose the, Mike, we chose that we wanted to be in hybrid, and that we're going to do 2 days a week in person and 3 days remote. Each organization then took it back to their leadership teams, and they talked through what would make the most sense for them individually. I don't have the data, Beth, I'm not sure if you do, in terms of how many have chosen which of them. So we talk about those as being, like either an AAC-BB hybrid model or an ABC-AB model. And I know there are a fair amount that are doing the 2 consecutive days, and there are some that have also chosen the alternating.
And I think that looks different at the high school, because you're talking about larger cohorts, and many of the high schools are going with like a schedule where their A schedule would be on Monday, B schedule on Tuesday, and then Thursday's A schedule, Friday's B schedule for the same cohort. So it looks different depending on the size of the high school. So that's where the AB is getting confusing, I think, when people start talking about that. But we have left that up to the individual districts, and it depends on maintenance. It depends, the health screenings and all of that comes into it. So there's many guiding factors that went into choosing whether it's consecutive or whether it's different.
Well, one of the concerns I heard is that families in particular want to make sure, or hope to have, their children going to school on the same days, so that reduce childcare. And obviously, a lot of them are sending to the high school, whether it's Essex or whatever. First of all, how many schools or how many towns send to Essex? How many towns do you accept kids?
We have Essex, Westford, but we also have some communities from Grand Isle, or
no, that's what. How many towns do you accept kids from?
So we have Essex. Westford is within our district, so Westford students, and then we have anybody else that has the choice. So it's Georgia, Fairfax, or Fletcher, sorry, and then Grand Isle as anybody else. Those choice towns.
So you've got eight schools in addition to,
plus the public high school choice, which could be, that law.
So how do you lock in a schedule that allows kids to go to school the same day their siblings are going?
So we have made it so that that's a priority, that we will figure that out. We talked about that as superintendents. We know that families will want to be together. Now, saying that and talking about that with superintendents, I went back to my leadership team and I had somebody say, nope, I've actually had parents say they want to split it so that they're doing remote with one child and the end of the week they're doing it with a different child. So I think it's family dependent as well as district dependent and how they handle that.
But Beth is right that all the superintendents in the Champlain Valley knew that it was going to be a priority to support the families as best we can. So we really all have committed with trying to come up with, if, for example, I have an organization with 2 high schools, that, the high schools are working out their cohorts, and then the elementary and middle schools will then design it from where those high school students are placed to try to accommodate those families. So we are thoughtfully trying to support them.
So do students or parents actually have the right to request a change right up to the day school starts, or even after school starts? I think Mike touched on it, but I wasn't quite sure. Like, like in South Burlington, where there's a chance the budget may go down for a third time, some parents, especially if they're tuition students, may want to send to another school. At what point is there a cutoff, if there's a cutoff?
Well, I don't think you can send to another school when you're committed. That's a whole high school choice, and that's considered to the law, and we follow those if we have openings. I wouldn't allow an Essex high school student all of a sudden to say that they were going to go to BFA 2 weeks into it because they weren't happy with the instruction. So it's not that. We have to follow our law and our residencies.
But the tuition,
I think what
I'm talking
Mike,
more about the tuition, like up in the islands or Georgia or something like that, without
well,
a high
they're
school.
committed. They register for the year. They're committed. I mean, if they want to drop out, I guess at any time in a regular situation, they could drop out and apply someplace else. But
Well, for tuition,
Or if they want to get schooled, or if they want to get, the parents finally say, we're going to homeschool or something like that. I mean, so there's no hard and fast locked in date for everybody. They can bail out if they want.
I guess they can. It's like any normal year. We're treating it like if I have students from Grand Isle that want to go, they have to register, have their tuition voucher, and they do everything like they normally do. And if in the middle of the year they choose to not attend Essex High School, it would be like anything else. They can go. I think what somebody asked the question about, can you opt into, I think what was it, Ross that asked the question, or Mike, the one about if you're in hybrid, can you opt out to remote? I think that that's what they were referring to. And I think that each district will come up with that if we're committed to what we're doing right now with remote and hybrid. And I think it's really important we work with families. And that's number one. We have to work with families and make sure kids are successful. That's what we want.
Okay, I think Lola had her hand up here next. And very good.
You guys can hear me? Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah, I wanted to just jump back to what Mike was pointing out, which is that, you know, different schools will still have different schedules in terms of when kids are in classes. Are you worried about that also from a staffing perspective? Like, what if a teacher is expected to be in the classroom on the same day in which their own child is doing remote learning?
Yeah, we've definitely talked about that as a region. We know none of us would have chosen to be having to make these decisions in the pandemic that we have to make now. We recognize this is not only going to be a hardship for families with childcare, it's also going to be a hardship for our staff members. And I think that we do think that there are going to be some people who struggle with figuring out how to manage their own kids while at the same time being expected to be in person for instruction. So, you know, I think our hope as a region is that we can, you know, as a community in Vermont and in our area, that we can find ways to work with some community partners to maybe see if there are some options that people could come up with, some ideas that people could come up with to help to solve this problem for folks.
Right. And I'm really sorry, I know you have your hand up, Ross. I wanted to also go back to what Bridget had asked and just press you guys a little bit on that. You know, I imagine you've started doing staff surveys, and I know that you can't speak for the whole associations, but I would really love it if you could talk a little bit about what you are hearing from within your districts about your teachers' comfort levels with what's being proposed. You know, I just talked to a superintendent in central Vermont who's taking a much more conservative approach than I think I've seen most school districts in terms of going, you know, almost fully remote. And she was saying, I think the elephant in the room here is staffing and just being really worried about being able to offer what we are trying to promise families. And so if you could just speak to what those conversations have been like with your staff.
I do think that, you know, like community sentiment about our reopening plan, I think we all have staff members who are excited to have kids back in person, even though it's just part of the week. I think that we definitely all have staff members who are fearful and wish it was more conservative and wish it was maybe fully remote. And we definitely have groups of staff members who wish it was fully in person. So I don't think there's a superintendent that could say all of their staff members are kind of completely behind this plan. I think right now where we're at is we've just released the beginning part of it, but there's so many more details behind the scenes that we're working to fully shape and continue to develop. And I just think that we're at a place with our staff members that they have enough information that it's really generating a lot of questions right now around HR concerns or even logistical concerns. So that's what we're trying to capture in some of our surveys, or even some of us are doing we're trying to develop some frequently asked questions, because we are getting the same questions over and over again from our staff. Anything you want to add, Beth?
No, I do think, just as you said, there's a reaction from community as well as staff with what we're doing. I think as we have incidences where a teacher has to be remote, then we'll find remote teaching opportunities. But I can't say that straight across that that's going to happen. So those are the kind of, you asked for conversations, those are the conversations that I've been having, at least in the district, and we've talked about as superintendents too.
Okay, and I think, Ross, you're up next here. Let me just unmute you. Hold on 1 second. Then we got a couple more after that.
Right.
Okay, Ross, you're on.
A bit of a two-parter. One, pretty straightforward. How ready are the districts to just, if needed, make the pivot back to what we had this spring and go entirely towards online learning? What's in place to make sure that can be done quickly and efficiently?
I do think by going with the hybrid model, we've all been working on improvements for the remote and been working on that, so that being at the hybrid is almost like in the middle, right? So we'll be prepared for fully in person, and we can be prepared for the totally remote, which I think will be definitely better prepared for total remote than we were in the spring.
So yeah, I know a lot of it's, go ahead.
I just want to say that I think most of the plans are considering the 3 steps, the 3 possibilities that we might have. So that's the benefit we have now in terms of reopening in the fall. In the spring, we were thrown into this and we had to figure it out at the same time. We're flying the plane and building it at the same time. Now not that we've had enough time, there's a lot to do for sure. But we all are considering, you know, what would it look like? What would this look like if we were fully remote? And what would this look like if we were in a hybrid? And if we were to bring back all of our kids, what would this look like if we could bring back all of our kids? So I think that, you know, we are certainly all attending to the 3 very strong possibilities that will be in throughout the year.
Certainly, and just the point of clarity. So like, let's say I'm a student and I'm in class, you know, Monday, Thursday or something. Is the same teacher that I'm getting in person also running my remote instruction on those other 3 days? Or is that going to be a different instructor, you know, running my class on Zoom or however it's being done? And how, if it is a different instructor, is there going to be something in place to make sure that there's some consistency and fluidity to what's being taught and the way that the lessons are being presented?
I think that's also one of those examples that's going to vary by district, but I do think that one of the reasons why Wednesday is really important in this model is it allows districts and schools to be able to have some time for those teachers, if it is 2 different teachers, to have pre-planned collaborative planning time, so they can assure that there is some alignment with the expectations and the instruction that's happening for those kids.
True. So that whether it's Wednesday, and I know we mentioned that might not be Wednesday for everyone, but the idea of the Wednesday, aside from being used for deep cleaning, will kind of be like a catch up and a plan ahead day for those instructors.
And some professional learning potentially. Like this is a big curve, so there are lots of ways we're all planning to use that Wednesday time for staff members.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's see, Gregory, you're up here next. Should be, yep, there you go.
All right. Forgive me if this has been answered. I had a hard time connecting on time. So can you talk a little bit about the challenge of making a plan that kind of fits for a vast school population size? You know, we've got Montgomery Elementary that's very, very small, all the way up to Essex High School, some of the largest in the state. Can you just kind of talk about coming up with something that works for everybody and then being able to work from there?
Sure.
You're familiar to me, so I'll say hi.
Hi, Lynn.
So you started, Beth, and I'll jump in after.
The first thing as superintendents we did was to unpack the safety and health guidance for reopening schools together, made some almost non-negotiables together in agreements, and looked at our intent, and our hope was to have in-person instruction, especially with our youngest students, and then really unpacking that, realizing that being at 6 foot was not, the social distancing in a classroom was not feasible for Montgomery or Essex High School. We all, yes. You want to add to that? We did cover it a little before, but that's fine. I don't mind answering it again, but I might have missed something.
It was a hard decision, Greg, because I think all of us could say, well, we maybe could see this classroom or this classroom having the ability to do it, but it really didn't make sense to us to try to make a decision for a few classrooms and have everybody else look differently. So I think that Beth's absolutely right. The piece that was the same for all of us when analyzing, the capacity of those classrooms was if we had to exercise 6 feet of physical distancing per person in the room, not just the kids, but any adults that need to be in the room. It would have been a misstep for us to say, although our occupancy is 15, we're going to do the best we can and have 20 in that room. That we just couldn't get by in the middle of a pandemic. So that's where we all landed together. And it took us a long time to get there, because it really was about making the common agreements and seeing, like, is this specific to everyone, or is this something that those smaller districts are different? And we do have parts of our plan that are different based on size. We're not every part of our plan is consistent, but the big idea of the hybrid is consistent, because none of us could assure that 6 feet.
And this may be more district specific. So Lynn, if I have to talk to you another time, that's fine. I'm curious, I'm curious as far as like continuity of learning goes, are you guys planning for what if a teacher gets, contracts this? What if a staff member contracts this? How does somebody else step in, for 2 or 3 weeks, or God forbid something worse happens and they have to step in for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think go ahead, Beth.
I was just going to say, we hire subs and long-term subs all the time. And I also think that our team teachers, when I think about like a first grade team teachers across a district, support each other and work together for that. So there are, just as in everyday normalcy, we have plans for that. And I don't see it really as different. I do think about somebody that might have to be quarantined for 14 days. And then what does that look like with remote? And those are things I think that will be maybe handled differently in the districts, but we all know that those things could happen at any time. And we are constantly preparing for that and thinking about those things. Those are on our mind for sure.
I think the other piece is that we have other staff members who have the licensure to be able to step in, but they have a different job responsibility typically. So I think in many cases, Greg, we would have a bench, we would have people to work with. And I go back to what Beth said. I think she said it beautifully about the working collaboratively and creatively together. And maybe there are some other people that could be able to help even across schools for districts.
Are you asking teachers to do like longer term planning, maybe down on paper that could be handed over in a moment's notice, or is that maybe still in the works, or better plan than that? I don't know.
We aren't that far. I will say there's a lot to do between now and the opening of school, but I just think in general terms, teachers, the expectations for teachers, I can speak for my organization, is that they are ready with an emergency plan. If they have to be out for a week, we can roll up a 1 week emergency plan while we're trying to find somebody. So I would see that being similar.
All right, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, looks like Bridget here is next.
Thank you. I'm wondering, how helpful were the Agency of Education's guidelines to you? Did you wish, for more or less instruction from the state in any way in terms of putting together your plan?
Are you speaking specific to the reopening plan?
Yes.
I need to think about that one first.
I do too. I think with the, we all feel this way, that the guidance couldn't come soon enough. So as we were ending the school year and thinking about reopening in the fall, we needed and wanted guidance. I understand why it took longer, especially where it was collaboratively written with the Vermont Department of Health and the agency. So that piece, I am really thankful that that came out as a co-authored piece, and we were able to use that to set up our guidance. And then we were, as Champlain Valley superintendents, waiting for guidance around, can we offer remote learning at the same time we want to do hybrid? So we waited for that information. Could it have been sooner? Sure, but any of this could have been sooner and better for us to be able to plan. But we understand the complications and all that. But once we had that guidance last week, we were able to then move forward with our thinking that we were already doing after unpacking that health and the guidance for the safe and healthy reopening of schools. So we were ready to go to say, oh, yes, now our plan for hybrid model will work. And, I've had parents upset that it took so long, but we needed that guidance from the agency before we even knew it was a go. And they put, in those guidelines, or even around the amount of hours that's expected in a hybrid learning for different grade levels. So we needed that as well before we could really roll out a model. So as Champlain Valley superintendents, as Lynn said before, we were planning for 3 different models. And that's the only thing that we could do until we really had that guidance around the hybrid, until we figured out that we couldn't do in person, which was a sad moment for all of us. We were all,
really
yes. We want to be together. We want to be with our children. We want to be in person.
I'm going to add just something to that. I think that wherever you are as a stakeholder, I think it's easy to think that the people who are communicating with you should communicate more quickly, but we're all building this plane, right? Everybody's building this plane. Nobody has had any preparation to be able to lead during a pandemic. So I think that, there's probably frustration at the state level that some of the information they have to wait on comes from the federal level, and it kind of trickles down. So I know that, like Beth said, some community members wish we could have said this earlier, but then it just kind of goes backwards from there. So I really want to believe everybody's doing the best they can to push information out in a way that's as timely as possible.
Absolutely, thank you. Is there anything you expect more from the state at this time? Like, are there more things you're looking for from them in, September or in October as things begin?
Anticipating guidance still on, correct me if I'm wrong, Beth, there's a lot of information that we navigate. Social emotional learning, special education, our after school programs. Those are the 3 that jump to the top of my head. Beth?
Yes, I'm thinking those as well. And I do know that Secretary French said there would be updated guidance that we would have to And it makes sense that there will be on that health guidance, that there might be clarifications to things. And that only makes sense as we learn more about the pandemic and groupings of students and things. So that could change, and we know that, and we're expected to deal with that as we go.
Thank you very much.
Do you have any other questions? Oh, Mike, okay, hold on one second. Unmute you. All right, you should be on.
Thank you, Ben. I was just wondering, I keep hearing talk about deep cleaning on Wednesdays, and I guess what I'm trying to understand is there's going to be some that are using the ABC AB model, which means nightly cleaning and not just Wednesday cleaning. So, I mean, is there going to be less cleaning for those that are on the AACBB model? Or, I mean, isn't the cleaning going to have to be deep cleaning every single night, no matter what?
Yeah, we're all going to be cleaning a lot throughout the days, at night, in the morning, for sure.
Yes,
But
and
everybody
I think
kept saying about the deep cleaning on Wednesday. So what you really mean is deep cleaning every single day, morning, noon, and night.
there is, and when you have a different cohort coming in from a Monday and then a Tuesday, those districts have figured out how to do that and keep it consistent. I know as a superintendent, it's really important to me that the buildings are cleaned, as always, nightly, and we'll be, as Lynn said, frequently cleaning banisters and doing all that we need to do according to the guidance. But on Wednesday, it allows our maintenance staff to really go in and have the range of the building at different hours and to be able to do that deep clean in the middle of the week, whether they had 2 cohorts in or 1 full cohort. So in each district, we'll use those Wednesdays and think about that maintenance. It allows them to do that now.
But there's a whole different level of cleaning now. I mean, last year, before this, obviously if the janitor did not go through with a mop for a day, nobody said anything. But now they actually have to go through with the mop and the squeegee and the
right.
all the things in every single room, bathroom, waiting room, any kind of room.
Mike, there is a really different expectation around cleaning, because I think that in the past we've all talked about cleaning, but now we're really focused on the cleaning and the disinfecting and making sure that, you know, we're using all of the proper products and that all of our staff is fully trained to understand not only which products are on that approved EPA list, but also, you know, how to effectively use them. So it's not, you know, I typically, when I clean my house, I take the stuff from the squirty clean bottle and wipe my counters down and call it good. But when you're using a disinfectant, sometimes there's more to it than that. And people are needing to attend to things like, how long does that have to remain wet on the surface before I can wipe it down in order for it to disinfect and be effective against COVID? So that's going to be happening on a daily basis, because that's really clear in the guidance about enhanced cleaning and disinfecting on a really regular rotation.
And how much of a role are faculty and staff going to do, as opposed to the janitorial staff that, you know, in your schools? I mean, teachers are going to have to start cleaning up after themselves.
I think that they're going to, you know, each of us is going to approach that we haven't made any of those decisions as a group, but I definitely think, you know, if you're a teacher who has a group of students in your room, and then you have another group of students coming into your room, there will be a need to wipe down surfaces and disinfect if you've used materials. We're pretty focused on getting individual materials for kids so that we're not sharing wherever possible, but there definitely will be some additional things that, you know, they'll have to do between students in the day. I'm not really looking at it as they're going to have to clean their space before or after school. That will be custodial, but during the day when there's a need, we're going to do everything we can to ensure those health and safety guidelines are met.
And have your budgets been increased at all to add more staff for janitorial services or anything like that to be able to? I mean, I don't know. You've got what, 2 high schools?
Mhm.
You've got Enosburg and Richford. I mean,
Yeah.
how many janitors do you have in each school there?
I really can't answer that off the top of my head. I think we probably have 4 or 5 in the bigger high school because we have a lot of part-time people too. So I just don't know off the top of my head. We haven't necessarily increased the budget, but the way I've approached it is if we need additional hours with people to be able to meet this expectation, this isn't a time where I can say I can't afford to do that because I don't have that in the budget. We're going to do it because the priority is the health and safety of our students and staff. And if we need to, we do have access to some COVID related relief money. We certainly can earmark some of those services specific to that money.
Okay, I think we have time for a couple more questions. I think Greg had his hand up here next. Gregory, let me just unmute you.
Just a
Sorry, hold on one second. All right, you should be good now. Sorry.
Okay, just a quick question here. How are you dealing with teachers and staff members who are at a higher risk, whether it be for age or previous illness, that kind of thing? How are you treating that kind of thing as you go back?
We have to treat that just as we did a year ago. So we have our regulations that they go through medical, FMLA, they can choose. So it goes back to normal law and regulations and HR procedures that we each have in our districts, and we need to follow those. Lynn, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think there's also the addition of the Family First Corona. I don't get that acronym right. You know what I mean, though, right?
Yeah, I think
it
passed back in March.
Yeah, but I just think that it is confusing, right? Because we're coming off a time where the way we applied those things in the spring, has expired. That was part of the executive order and that's expired. So that's exactly right. It's important that staff members talk with their primary care providers and they determine whether or not it's safe for them to return. And then we have to take a look at, what's the responsibility, what's within their job description, what do we need them to be able to do. And then they'll have to work with our human resources folks to see if whatever condition they have does qualify them for any of the typical routes.
And what accommodations we need to make, just as we would in normal times. And also, as I said before, there might be situations where a teacher can teach remotely and we'll really access that talent and time to do that. So
it won't be something that we'll be able to say broadly, we could just find you a remote position. Like, I think that's the part that we're having to work out is we have a need to have our staff members in person. And what we don't have, and Mike asked about budget in the previous question, is the ability to kind of double pay and say, we'll keep you on and give you something remotely and we'll hire because your job is really, we need you in person. So it's hard because it's hard for staff to hear that and it's hard for us as administrators to navigate through, but we have to, look out for our staff and also the organization at the same time.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like somebody who's a year or two away from retirement is, if they're not able to come back for a safety point of view, how do you guys work with something like that? I mean, it's tough, obviously, but maybe that's where you're saying you're thinking of hiring someone and having them work remotely.
I mean, I think we're gonna have to figure it out, and we're gonna have to see what they're eligible for, Greg. And if we can make it work, we will. But it isn't something that we can broadly say we'll find something remote for all of our staff members to do.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
All right. Lola's up next here. Let me just unmute you. Okay, you're good to go.
All right, this will be the last question. Thank you, and I really appreciate all the time you've given us. So remote learning, I think it's pretty clear, is the toughest on really young kids. There is encouraging, but definitely not settled science that younger children do not transmit this virus nearly as much as older children or adults. I've seen, and then also just from a childcare perspective, that's where the need is most acute. So I've seen some districts put a premium on the younger kids to get them as much in-person instruction as possible, with a little less in the older grades. It seems like you guys are not doing this. You know, there's going to be the same amount of in-person and remote learning across the grades. I imagine you guys talked about this as an option. So why did you go in this direction on that subject?
Do you want me to go or do you want to go?
I think we've said it, but sure, you can take it.
So
if you can word it differently than I did.
We wanted that, Lola. We worked hard to figure out how we could do that. When Beth said it was earlier, when Beth said this was really hard, like this was a painful decision because we also want to prioritize that in-person learning for our youngest kids, but we could not find the way to write that 6 feet and having that number of students in the space. So that's the piece that we couldn't figure it out. So I think that the one thing that I hope is, I think the governor announced something today around mandatory masks. And I think that, Vermont has done a pretty good job of suppressing the spread of COVID-19. We've also done a really great job with, the contact tracing to try to prevent continued spread of it. And what I'm hoping is that our numbers can continue to look good. And at some point, our public health experts can feel confident in being able to say, okay, the outlook is better. So we think that we could shift our best practice so that you could bring kids back with something less than 6 feet. And I will tell you, I know I can speak on behalf of the superintendents in the Champlain Valley that we would love to find a way to be able to meet the expectations of the health and safety guidelines and get more students back in person.
Yes. Absolutely. Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more question. I don't know if anybody hasn't asked one yet or last call. All right, looks like Mike, hold on one second here. That's the last one.
I can't tell if you're trying to type something when you do that.
All right, Mike, you're unmuted.
I'm a one-finger typist, so you'll see it. So one of the big things we hear from parents is kids are not going to be excited about wearing masks in schools. And as educators, could both of you give your 3 best tips to parents about dealing with kids and masks, and what should parents tell the kids and to have full compliance in your schools? What are your 3 best tips, each of you?
I think one of the things parents can start to do now is to have a child wear it for a half hour, increase it to an hour a day, increase it to 2 hours a day, and so that the child is comfortable with it, and also that the child is comfortable seeing their own parents in masks. When I go into Hannaford's, I see students or kids, children and adults with masks, and that's what I think our children need to see. And it's a new normal, and that we have to get used to it. I know that when I have a mask on for a long period of time, it is aggravating. We hope that we can take some breaks, get outside, social distance, have a break with a mask. And I think that when we get used to seeing each other in a mask and being able to get that almost like our tolerance up for wearing that mask, that'll be helpful. That's, I think, really important. And that the other tip is it's for the safety for everybody, for yourself and for others. And that's how we have to keep our communities safe.
always have a hard time when someone tells me, can you give me 3? Because I can sometimes think of 2. And
Okay, 4. 4.
can I tell you just all I can think of? So I would agree with Beth. Try to allow them opportunities to practice. And I think that we all know, I mean, I watch all the press conferences and I also live in these communities, and we know that masks, that's one of the most polarizing parts of this, is that the belief in whether or not you should wear a mask, you have people on one side and the other, and people are really angry about that. And I think that being careful about the conversations you have in front of your child, because children tend to look to their parents to see how do my parents feel about that, and that really informs how they feel about it. So I think giving them the opportunity to practice and encouraging them and letting them know that this is something that we all have to do, like Beth said, to be safe, and just try to turn it into a positive for them, even if they don't believe it, which I know is hard. And then I think the other part is, and I heard the governor talk about it today, that if there's some research that said that if everybody wore a mask, what was it, 6 weeks? Within 6 weeks, I think, or 8 weeks, that we could have a much better handle as a country on what the virus is doing. I think that letting kids think about wearing masks as this is what we need to do in order for us to get back to school, right? In order for us to get back to normal.
Great. Thank you.
3? I think I did 3.
You beat me.
All right, great. I think that's going to wrap it up for today. We've reached the hour mark. So I just want to thank you all for taking the time to attend the press conference. And I'm sure you'll be seeing more and more information about the start of the school year will be shared with each of you over the next few weeks as we learn more and more. Lastly, if you'd like a copy of this recording, I recorded this. I'm going to stay on for another minute or two, and you can just send me your email address in the chat, and I can share that with you. So I don't know if any last words from Lynn or Beth.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And it was a good opportunity to speak with all of you and stick together as Champlain Valley superintendents. So thank you.
Great. Thank you all for coming today.
Thanks, everyone.